I'm Suzanne Murdoch and welcome to Series 3 of Powering Productivity. Each episode I explore the energy that really genuine connections, expertise and being in your best flexible working environment can bring to you, your business and your whole life. So let's get started. Welcome, I'm your host Suzanne Murdoch and welcome back to you if you've joined us before, and a very warm welcome for you new listeners out there. Now, go easy on me. This is my first episode for a little while. Today, we are talking keeping it local, exploring the possibilities of regional working and independent, flexible office workspaces. To assist me with this, I am joined by the lovely Bernie Mitchell, the seasoned expert who's been around on the co-working circuit for as long as I can remember co-working being around. Massive advocate for co-working, a writer, podcaster and coach. And Bernie's a massive champion for us smaller, more local and flexible workplace operators and very much communities as well. So Bernie, we recently spoke on your podcast a little while ago about the importance of inclusive and collaborative co-working communities. And we touched on, I guess, the transformative power of those spaces and how they can really bring or what they can bring to a diverse cohorts, increase productivity, promoting fulfilment, and really that belonging, that psychological safety that a lot of us often crave. So I'm keen to follow on from that and explore, I guess, the value that the more local, regional and smaller co-working spaces can bring to both remote hybrid workers, but very much to communities as well, the local community. So if you would, Bernie, for those who haven't met you or listened to you before, could you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
My cute answer to this nowadays is like I talk and I type, which I stole from someone I did a podcast with, because that's what I love. I love typing and researching and then doing this and podcasting and having conversations with people. And then a lot of it is about, I mean, it's not a career, but it's what I do, is I find people and I connect them and their ideas, and that's what I end up doing. So, you know, people pay me money to give them advice on how to run a co-working space, but actually what I do all day long is like interview people, and I'm just wildly curious about how people do things. And this local community thing is like the co-working local community thing is a conversation I discovered at Co-working Europe in like 2014, and you know I've just never been able to let it go, and it's something that like grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. And COVID, I think, sort of supercharged the acceleration of the future of work, as we like to call it. So now it's even more exciting than ever.
And there's a lot of spin-offs, I guess, from co-working communities as well. And we're talking the local economy. There's a lot of different avenues and things that feed into the co-working community. So you've got obviously people working in the centres themselves, and then they go and talk to shop owners, etc., local businesses, and it's this massive spiral effect. And I think, like you said, especially since COVID, it's really blossomed and it's just evolving massively, and there's something different happening every month.
There is, I'm like in London, which is, you know, where I've lived since like 1992, and we moved to Spain in 2022. When the co-working, actually, let me start here. I got to know co-working so well in London because I was in a meetup group called Kindred, run by a lady called Alex Butler, who had been part of the whole tech city setup, and what I don't know if it still is, but it was known as Silicon Roundabout by Old Street. And back in 2010, if you were a freelancer, it was like secret code for I can't get a job. And she was like, actually, no, freelancers and independent workers is like a really valid career choice. And she knew lots of, you know, freelancers, and we'd get them all together in a meetup group. And in about that time, there was this thing called co-working that had been around before, obviously, but it was like exploding in London. And she would go to co-working spaces and say, would you like, you know, 10 freelancers to come and sit in your building, you know, once a week for 2 hours and meet? So I got to go to nearly every time a new co-working space opened, they got in contact with Alex, and I got to meet lots of co-working spaces as they opened in London, because I went to a different meetup every day, and that's how I got into it. And then at that point, all those co-working spaces I'd actually say like 80% of those co-working spaces were in zone one of London, and the other 20% were in zone two. And now there's more and more places opening up in, I always say this wrong, six, five, and four. So people are commuting less. And there's a stat which Islington, which is a borough in London, are really red hot on local co-working and affordable workspace and everything like that. And they have an inclusion department. And the inclusion department researched, and this is probably a few years old now, but every time someone spends £1 with a local business, it goes around the local economy 4 times. But when they go and spend £1 with Marks and Spencers or Sainsbury's or a big global company, it kind of exits the local economy right away. So it's better. I mean, it's not a new conversation, but spending money with local businesses reinforces the economic strength of that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't there a stat? It's been around for a while, so it's probably increased a bit, but every co-worker in a co-working space spends something like £7-8 a day in the local economy. It might even be higher than that now.
There's something like that, but a friend of mine, Irene, did some research at I'm not going to say it because it's bad karma, but a very well-known top shelf margarita type co-working space. And this was 2018, 2019. And because of where it was close to a mainline railway station in London, people would come off, buy their food at like Pret or Tesco, go into the co-working space, and then leave and not really actually spend any money with the local places around there. And my gut feeling and sort of what I want to be true is that if I'm, coming to a place like yours, I will be part of the local community rather than commuting in to commute. If I'm a co-worker commuter, like TM, co-worker commuter, I'll come in and I'll just like sleepwalk into brand names and stuff like that and not really connect with the local area. But if I stay in my home area and like we were talking before we came on, I think that makes you, I know from personal experience, I end up going to shop locally rather than just commuting.
Yeah, no, I love that. And then if you're doing that as well, when you go to the likes of conferences in the bigger cities, you've got that culture and you've got that the different experiences, cultures, etc., that you can take into the city. Hence why I guess they're quite cosmopolitan. But I think it's a real two-way thing, and they can really feed each other. Your city-centric brands, co-working spaces, as well as the more peripheral villages.
I got into in whenever it was lockdown started to subside, I was in a place called Workhive in Ilford, and I've been probably since 2010. I've been looking for a co-working space in Redbridge, which was the borough I lived in, London, and there was never anything. There was some really like horrible serviced offices, and they looked like something out an episode of Minder. They were like really terrible. And they're still operating like that. And I wanted a co-working space, not an office. And then Workhive was started by a guy called Paul, and he just had a lot of experience in architecture and office design and everything. So he took over this building, and it was a really, really well-designed building. It wasn't flash; it was just very, very well done. And I was there for like 2 years, and I shared an office with another guy who I'd met in a co-working space we were in together beforehand. And then I would go there every day. I'd walk around. I'd wave to people in the park. I'd go to all the local restaurants nearby. And then when I needed to go into town, then I'd go into, know lots of people who run co-working spaces in town. And then I'd go in. And that for me, I mean, I don't know if I could have done that for 25 years, but that was great because and especially with the Elizabeth line, you can get from Ilford to, probably Ireland now by by the Elizabeth line. So it's like super convenient. You save so much time traveling, and you get more so than the local economy. You get to know people in your local area.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and there's so many people who work as well for the bigger companies that you get all the experiences, you get the skill set. There's always someone that knows something that you don't know or can connect you to someone. The whole world is so joined up now. It really is a small world. Bernie, when we're talking about these smaller, more local spaces, what do you think the nuances and added values are for remote hybrid workers? as opposed to commuting into the city-centric bigger brands?
So I'm in a tiny little co-working space here. There's 10 people, and 3 or 4 of those people are in that situation. And I'm in this little kind of co-working community fairy tale, because where our son goes to school, the co-working space is right by the school. So all the people who run the co-working space and work in the co-working space, our kids all go to the same school. And there's like no commute. There's this really, really strong sense of community, which is definitely dependent on Chris and Zapata, who run the co-working space. I think I'm going off topic for your question here, but the people, because of who runs it, that has a huge influence, which I'm sure people know. But then there's just that massive lack of commute. There's meeting people outside your work and finding other ideas. So quite often we all sit down for lunch together, and we end up chatting about stuff. And someone says, "Oh, like this thing happened on a website. I'm not quite sure what to do. Oh, try this. My mate does this." And then they get like cross referred. So it's not like a business networking group. It's like an idea exchange. And I all the way through that, like, brain draining future of work, should we go back to the office conversation? Most of maybe because I'm looking for it, but people don't mind going to the office and meeting their team members and stuff like that. It's like obviously really important, but it's like sitting on the train from Brentwood to Liverpool Street, and getting stuck, and all that cost and time is the killer. So there's the added sense of community of being in a little co-working space, and there's not having to do the commute. And then if you're because you're not having to do the commute, you can go and pick your kid up from school, or you can go and run around the local area and stuff like that. It just saves so much time and enhances your life.
Yeah. And I think for me, it feels a lot more organic. You are networking, but you're naturally networking. You're not put in this forced situation. And I think it's a more natural environment for different personalities. And I've put there's a question later on about introverted personalities and how can they help in that situation. But I think co-working spaces naturally lend themselves to different environments for different people, different ways of working at different times during the day. So I think for me, it's a lot more organic.
Yeah. I've never really known anything different. I've gone to offices in the past of projects I've been working on, but I found, particularly, I think when we moved from London to Spain, I had to eat my own dog food, because for years I've been going like, oh, co-working is such a great way to go native and meet people and everything like that. And that's actually what happened. We've been coming to this town for at least a decade before we moved here, because my brother-in-law lived here. So I kept an eye on co-working. And when we first came, there was one really odd serviced office I wasn't even sure it was a serviced office, but it had the word co-working on the website. And I never managed to get in there. And in the last decade, there's probably like only 20 co-working spaces in this town. 20 co-working spaces and 2 Starbucks, which I love. And I've got to know that community. And that was how I got connected to the city properly. That's how I arrived here, because I've got to know people through co-working.
That's another thing. It's brilliant for signposting. So we've had members here for, how old are we? 12 years old we are in the Hub Newry, and our members, a couple of them joined when we started up. Kids have grown up together. It feels like a family dynamic, if you like.
Yep.
And we've got to know different organisations and tips and tricks, etc., of what to do at whatever time with the kids. If we're struggling with certain things at school, etc., there's always someone to bounce ideas off of. So it works. It's worked really well for us, and it's certainly hopefully well for our members, because they're still with us. So, moving on, creating, I guess, a workplace that people really want to belong to, aside from the functionality side of things. What drives those members to stay within the membership, within that space, just from your experience?
There's for me, it's always been about, like, I know this sounds really cliche, like, it's the connections with people. So when I remember a place called Bathtub to Boardroom, which is closed now, but it was in London, and Jacinda was the CEO, and we're still friends nowadays. And she was just she was super organized, but she was just really, really good at knowing everybody in the building and going, "Oh, Susan, I noticed you were drinking this particular brand of green tea. I saw Bernie doing that, or didn't I see you playing baseball on Instagram? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, like Suzanne does that, and it's like stitching together. And I think it's not impossible to do that in a bigger branded space. But when there's like, places like you where you and Patrick are, I see you on Instagram all going out for dinner and stuff like that. It's not you can't do that in a bigger place, but I think that's for me is the difference between a co-working space and an office that wants to adopt a co-working mindset. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess it's more forced in that instance, perhaps.
Yeah,
And
it's like I grew up in restaurants and hospitality and everything like that. And I worked for, at the peak of my career, I worked for Pizza Hut. I worked for Pizza Hut and TGI Fridays and Intercontinental Hotels and all and those type of things. And it was very well organized and efficient and everything like that. And I definitely learned a lot of stuff there that you wouldn't learn, in an indie restaurant. But then my best times and most connected times were working in places where they had one or two or three places, and you were kind of part of the action. And you know, there was never this. I know this is just part of business, but there was never like, Derek from head office is coming today. It was like he's the owner, and that always worked way better for me. It was more precarious in some stages, like not enough people are coming to the restaurant that month, and you could see the owner like going mad about how he's going to pay everybody and who. But the action, the feeling of like being part of something was more important to me than it was being part of a huge global operation.
yeah,
I'm not sure that answered your question. Sorry,
no,
but
no, it does. It's those words being part of that whole
yeah,
fulfillment, coming back to that word community. And I guess it's all driven very much by the relationships and the long-term relationships and really getting to know your clients, members, whatever you like to call them, to an extent where you can anticipate their needs before they even realize them. You can anticipate the challenges they might have. Um, you can tell if they're having an off day and they might need some support. You just pick up on these nuances that are happening.
there was one of my greatest hit stories is when I was in a place called Mainyard Studios in Hackney. My friend Eleanor used to stand. She didn't work there. She was just part of the core membership, and she would stand in the kitchen in the morning, and she would say, "Oh, what are you doing today?" And for at least the first 3 weeks, she asked me. I had no idea what I was doing today. I was just like glad to get in the building. And then I'd started to sort of organize myself. Oh well, um, I'm I've got my day plan like this, and just those. And I know it sounds silly, but like those little interactions of, and it was a particularly dark mental time, so it really helped. And she wasn't delivering therapy or anything, but like it was being there and aware and jigging people over. And that's why I always advocate going to a co-working space, because I think it's so good for your mental well-being. And even if you haven't got a mental health challenge at the moment, like getting out the house and moving and breathing and having to interact with people is really, really important. And like I'm in our home office today, and it's just such a luxury to have, stay at home and, not have to go out and do stuff. But it's not instead of, but as well as is where I'd like to like direct people.
Yeah, I think so. And that word nurture comes to mind in co-working spaces as well. I know when in COVID where you weren't really allowed to speak to anyone, or you could see someone but you couldn't touch them. Just knowing that there was someone else in the office next to you meant the world.
Yeah,
There was someone else in the building. You could shout at them, through the wall. But there was that,
hang on the wall.
yeah. But there was that support there that where at home you just wouldn't have got that. But hey, we've moved past that bit now. So in terms of, I guess, coming back to that community, nurturing, sustaining the community and that whole environment thing, the sense of belonging, fulfillment, and the whole piece around humanity in the workplace. What does that mean to you? Acts of service, fulfilment spring to mind for me.
There's been like when I've worked for a company, there's been times I've been part of a team, and like everyone's really been all in and cared, and it's been great. And it's been like being part of a it's like being part of a sports team versus being part of a team working on building a car or something. And that sense of understanding. I know this is almost what we just said, but like that sense of understanding and connection and rooting for each other is really, really important. And that's one of the things that has made me veer towards working independently rather than working for a big company, because I've had lots of friends. This is a bit of a sideways answer, sorry, but I've had lots of friends that have like one, they've been let go unexpectedly because their branch has been closed down, or the lack of information moving around. So they think they're part of something, and then they're suddenly not part of something. And there's this like machine that like cuts off that bit because it's not working. And I always found that quite hard to, I know that's just a reality of, huge, huge businesses, but that was a bit I always found unattractive about working in that type of workplace. The, that you have the lack of agency that comes of being part of something bigger, no matter what position you're in.
Yeah. And for me, I think it allows that, I guess we're coming back to coaching talk here, but it allows that almost like a safe space as well for people to get to know each other, to have that awareness, really understand personalities, the best ways of working. But as I mentioned before, that almost like a safe psychological space as well, where you can experiment, you can get curious, you can have that space to really question what you're doing, question your thinking, the possibilities.
So there's two little points that popped into my head there. There's like I've read everything ever by Brené Brown, and that has really informed like how I work with people, my own self-awareness, which is always a work in progress, and also like how I deal with my family, and especially parenting. There's a whole chunk about that, and in there she says, she did a TED talk and became big, and companies would say, oh, come and let's have Brené Brown in because she's the speaker at the moment and she's been doing all these things. And they say, we don't want to talk about vulnerability, we want to talk about creativity and productivity. And she's like, but vulnerability comes from, I'm trying to think of people like, sorry to, obviously, when we talk about inventing things like Thomas Edison, he wasn't being productive when he was making light bulbs. He was like trying and trying and trying and messing up and messing up, and it was a very vulnerable space. And that's such a cliche example. I'm sorry, but so vulnerability is a massive part of like creativity, and a word I think is overused, but innovation is when you're at the edge of something. Even opening a co-working space, in like when you folks did, it's like I've heard this co-working thing. Do you think it will work? I don't know,
Yeah,
but like,
not sure what it is, but we'll do it
yeah.
anyway.
What Patrick and Susan doing? They should just open a garage and sell crisps, not a co-working space. It's like I'm exaggerating for effect, but it's like a daring thing to do. So there was a lot of vulnerability, and when you run your own business, there's a huge amount of like risk and uncertainty and vulnerability there. So operating in that space is really hard. I did have a second example, but it's completely gone. Sorry.
No worries. Actually, that brings me on nicely to the next topic. In terms of, if we look at this from the flexible workspace operator's perspective. So, I mean, that whole job, and you'll know this, I know this, there's an awful lot that goes with it. And you are very vulnerable. You're constantly having to chase the evolving workplace and what people are looking for, their requirements, etc. You've got compliance, you've got the driving the community, the relationship building, the pricing, events, etc. There's an awful lot that comes under that umbrella. What about the whole overwhelm for operators and burnout? I know you do a lot of coaching around this. Are there any tips?
I think there's trying to be everything to everyone, and there's one space I work with, and they want it to be like it's like opening a restaurant that sold everything on the menu, and this was before COVID. Um, and I was amazed at and it's not like they were, they were like a really smart person. I was like, if you just serve fish and chips and maybe a saveloy and a vegetarian thing, that's all you need to do. But they wanted to have like spaghetti and sushi and flambés and lentil stew. It's like, just do this, just do that bit really well. And then after you got that working, do this, like introduce burgers or something, and like one thing at a time. And if all those people that wanted all those things all arrived at the same time, your head would fall off. And I feel in that, particularly like owner managed spaces, when there's like an owner and a community manager, or maybe there's like four people who run the building. They're in this. You're sort of torn between, the owner. If you're a community manager, that's the best way to explain it. If you're a community manager running all these things, you have to be serving the owner, and you have to be serving, I know, 50 members, and you can get stretched in so many directions, and you need to really like work out a system that works with where you are. So there's Adam, who is a long running community manager at Indy Hall, and his answer for everything is ask the community. Where's the printer? Ask the community. And he's not being like, I can't be bothered to tell you. It's like, if you go and ask the community, like Susan will tell you how to run the printer, and then I won't have to. And then there's all these micro conversations going, and everyone ends up helping each other. And there is a lot of effort in there. I don't mean to sound that like a quick fix, flick your fingers and it will all work. But when you sort of activate people in the community to help each other, it takes a huge burden off yourself, and that's a whole curation bit in itself.
Yeah, and it serves so many different purposes: to get to know each other, to get to know what they do, the skill sets, and it can spiral in a really positive way. Doing it that way, I think it just makes a lot of sense. And I know I was reading an article, or maybe it was on your website, your coaching, that you do help a lot of operators, for example, and simplify, I guess, the strategy of doing this sort of work. I mean, what benefit, in your experience, does coaching bring to co-working operators?
Like acting, like being coached, or
Yeah, being
accidentally
coached.
coaching people. But
Well, I guess both.
So with I've read it somewhere early on, because I used to think like, right, like 15 years ago, be like, oh, coach, like I'm so good, I don't need any help. And then someone said to me, like, people sitting on their sofa eating chips, fish and chips all day, watching movies, don't have a coach. People running 4-minute miles and scoring goals consistently do have a coach. And then and then that whole kind of like growing out. So now, I've got two people I work with, and and then sometimes a therapist, depending on how life is going. And if I didn't go and talk to those people, I would be, I don't know what would be going on. And I'm a dyslexic, I'm sure I'm ADHD, and I'm jumping all over the place. I have a million ideas a second. And, like one of them every 5 years might make it into a thing. But unless I kind of operate within a structure, either of a coach. So very, very often I know every Monday morning I'll speak to Anne Hawkins, and I just save everything up to there, and I make a list, and 70% of what's on that list doesn't matter by the time I get to the meeting. And at least half of that 70% is like complete Bernie drama. And the other 35% has worked itself out altogether. And I'm not, burdening my wife with things. And it doesn't mean every interaction I have with my friends is like a semi therapeutic coaching save my life session. It just kind of brings clarity all the way around.
So it's kind of like a check-in accountability session.
Yeah. I mean, another accountability. This isn't a coaching thing, but there's a book called The 12-Week Year, and in our co-working space in Houston, we used to run this session for freelancers every Monday called Not So Manic Monday, and the whole like jokey point of it was people who work independently to actually get out of bed and have to be somewhere by 10 o'clock on Monday, and then and then their week would start on a Monday at 10 o'clock, not somewhere halfway through Wednesday afternoon. And we followed there's two things we did is we followed there's a guy called John Stepper who has a book called Working Out Loud, where you talk about what you're working on and share ideas. And then the 12-week year is part of that is working in 3-month chunks. So every quarter you have a set of goals. And then on Monday or once a week, you have a weekly accountability meeting, which is what made me say this. And every Monday since 2018, me and Karen, no matter where we are in the world, have had a weekly accountability meeting. And it's, there's always a fitness goal and we go up and down. And it's one of the things that kept us alive kept us sane in lockdown. It's like, how you doing? I don't know. Like, I've got to keep meditating, I've got to keep running. I've got to find a way to do this. And, it's huge having an external force help you with your life.
And it doesn't always give you the answers. It just allows you that space to air what you're thinking. There's no right or wrong answers. I think but it quite often clarifies thoughts that you might be having.
Yep. What I was about to shout out there, sorry to interrupt. I got all excited, because there's that distinction between coaching and mentoring. It's like, do you want advice, or do you want me to ask you some really sticky, awkward questions that make you do the hard work of thinking so you work it out for yourself?
Yeah. And it's not always easy. It can be quite uncomfortable. There's often silent pauses to allow you that time to think.
Yeah.
But it works. And this isn't just applicable to co-working operators. This can be used in all sorts of different avenues. But it really, it's helped me massively. And I've been doing a lot of coaching with other industry leaders, really enjoying it. But I think the word clarify springs to mind for me. And certainly the mentoring is growing massively, and the reverse mentoring. So, for example, in different businesses, it's not just top down, it can be bottom up as well. And everyone's bringing that skill set to the table and experiences and maybe their challenges.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeking it out as well, but a lot of stuff I read that is about conversations and talking and connection, at a corporate level, and there's like overwhelmed. I haven't got anything to cite directly here, but books I've read by very well thought out people, and talks I've been to and stuff like that. The more in like COVID and lockdown and that separation brought a need for working out how to work in a situation like this. So there's Judy Rees, who is I can't remember what her thing's called, but it's like everything she is about coaching around clarity and communication. And her business exploded in COVID because all the people like the United Nations were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And someone said, oh, I know Judy, she's really good at like clarity and communication. And she's never been busier. And this kind of need for connection and clarity and communication to not just make better businesses, but like further personally and the team and the whole mission and project is huge. And one of the things that seems to have gone down is this need for like top down, like usually one white guy who knows everything and has to tell everyone what to do. And I've never, even before I knew what that was, I never liked that way of doing stuff. When I was at school, there was some form of democracy and conversation. And the ones it's not I hated, but like I just didn't respond to or get anywhere in, well, where there was like you had to sit in silence, be obedient, and you're not quite sure what you're doing. And there was no freedom or agency allowed.
Yeah, interaction. And let's face it, how often do we get to sit down with someone and actually someone listening, really focusing in on us for more than 2 minutes at a time? It's quite rare. And I think when it happens to you, these sparks just go off on all these ideas and that clarity thing. It's just a different world for me. Wary of time, Bernie, I want to touch on the work that you do with London Assembly. Tell us a little bit about that.
The London Coworking Assembly. London Assembly is an organisation run by the
Assembly. Forgive me.
So that is there anything particular before I I go into autopilot.
Just quickly, what it is, how it came about, and then the event coming up in February.
So how it came about is in 2014, a load of us went to Co-working Europe in Lisbon, and there was a group called Co-Pass that used to run a camp at every Co-working Europe, and now we do that at different places nowadays. But so it was like 40 co-working space operators staying in this amazing hostel in Lisbon, and it was a riot. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life, and we all came back from Lisbon and we're like, oh my goodness, it's like we'd all come back from Burning Man co-working. We want to have that here. So there was a Facebook group that was started, and we started meeting each other, and it never had any real structure. And then in 2018, after years of like jumping about and doing different things, we said, okay, let's just meet once a month in a different co-working space and see what happens. And it started as a few people around a table having breakfast together, chatting, a bit like a breakfast networking meeting. And then it moved into this thing where like every month we have a panel and a topic. And it's always, we call people co-creators, which is secret code for sponsor, but people give financial support to the co-working assembly, which makes it accessible for everybody. Because, like I go to conferences and get a lot out of them, but, when you run a co-working space, you can't send like 3 community managers to the thing. And then what we found early on was people would say, oh, if you want to go, you can pay for yourself. But, I want to go, but I don't want to pay. And so by making it very accessible to everyone, from local authority people to co-working space, it's mainly co-working space operators and community managers that go. And then we just work out. Normally, I'd like to be more organized in this, but what happens is we do an event and someone says, oh, we should do this. And then we just do the next one like that. And then in where you're coming at the end of February, on the 27th and 28th is the Workspace Design Show in London. And we got to know the Workspace Design Show, and we've become in the London and Amsterdam, we become like the co-working arm of that event. And they provide us with a space to run 2 events dedicated to independent co-working space owners. And the Workspace Design Show is I don't like exhibitions, but I love this one. Like when I went to it, I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to go to this, but it is super, super interesting. You can look at coffee machines and play with curtains and chairs, and there's really, really good talks. And I'm keen to say that all the people that are doing the talks in the main the main workspace design arena are there by merit. So it's not like a lot of whatever industry is, a lot of conferences, you pay to be on the stage. And this is people who are, actors and contributors to the industry, sharing their knowledge in the main thing. So you can come to the London Coworking Assembly 2 breakfast events and then spend 2 days. I think you have to go home in between, but then spend 2 days finding out. Mainly that is about offices. I don't know, offices and corporations and companies and HR and how to lay out your offices and design and everything like that. So I think it's free to get into, and it's really interesting and a very good use of time for people to see a lot in a very short space of time.
Brilliant. Well, I'm looking forward to going. I haven't been there before. Bernie, really good talking to you. Tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch, where they can find out more.
So you can Google or Bing or whatever you use, Bernie J. Mitchell, and there's normally a fight between myself and a drywall artist in Canada who has the same name as me. And if you go to LinkedIn, there's that's the best place to get me, actually. It's just
okay.
My website's berniejmitchell.com, but LinkedIn is where I'm most contactable. So feel free to
Brilliant.
DM me or something there.
And we'll put that in the show notes after. Good stuff. Bernie, thanks so much for your time. Good luck, and I will see you in February.
Thank you very much. Take care, folks.
Thanks for listening. You can find more information in the show notes or on our website, thehubnewry.com. While you're there, why not join our mailing list so we can keep you in the know about everything we're up to? And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen so you don't miss an episode. Powering Productivity is presented by me, Suzanne Murdoch. It's produced by Emily Crosby Media.